Hello everyone, Jesse's back. We're talking about Path of Exile. There's a new league coming out. It's coming out on Friday. It's March Madness Saturday this weekend. A lot of people are watching sports, and I am at home looking at Path of Exile patch notes. I wanted to talk about specifically the new gym that is warcry related. I've made a lot of videos and content about slams specifically and about my stance on melee in this game. And the first thing that comes to mind is that I actually was wrong about this skill gem for a while. I thought that it was bad. And then I realized that the mechanics are different than what I thought, and it's actually pretty good. So let's first talk about why I thought it was bad. This keystone, the call to arms keystone, is being removed next league. It will no longer be in the game. It will no longer be available. It is effectively being replaced by the call to arms gem. This keystone was not really ever used with multiple warcries. Generally, you would have one single warcry, like Intimidating Cry, for example, or Battle Mage's Cry, or General's Cry. And then you would use this on cooldown using left click. That's being removed next league. I thought the replacement was going to be you receive this exact same functionality, pound for pound, identical, but it's a new gem instead of a keystone. But that is not the case. If you actually read the wording on the gem, and I was wrong about this, if you read the wording on the gem and you look at the video that the developers posted, each supported warcry will trigger when its cooldown is over, and all your warcries share their cooldowns. The wording is a little bit different there, and fundamentally, these are two very different mechanics. The keystone was a one warcry at a time mechanic. This gem is a all supported warcries mechanic. So the way that manifests itself in game is that you effectively get the functionality of the keystone, where you have no warcry speed concerns, everything happens instantly, and it's triggered repeatedly, so you don't have to click anything. It's done automatically. And then also, multiple warcries are actually triggered at the same time. So how does this work mechanically? I don't know. It's actually the thing that it's been racking my brain a little bit, is that I don't know how this is going to manifest itself technically in game, because there are some things that warcries do that I'm not sure that they can do as an overlap. I mean, if they're both happening at the same time, one has to override the other, sort of. If you read what warcries do, performs a warcry taunting enemies. Some of them knock back, some of them don't. Interrupts enemies in a smaller area. I think this is the wording on Seismic. Knocks back and interrupts enemies in a smaller area. So does that mean that if Seismic goes off at the same time as Battle Mage's Cry, for example, I mean, I just don't understand exactly how it works. Do enemies still get knocked back and interrupted? Because some of these warcries affect enemies. I just don't know if it's going to work. I have concerns. I've found a lot of bugs in this game in my time, and I'm concerned that it's going to be bugged. But let's pretend the bugs don't exist for a minute. What can you actually do with this gem? Well, one of my thoughts was Rage Vortex, which I think I'm tentatively going to start Rage Vortex. I don't think this is good. Obviously, it's not good with Earth Shatter because you need to hit, cry. You need to sort of do things in succession. And I don't think you can get your warcry cooldown low enough to make it feel playable. I think it will be much better in an Intimidating Cry type setup. And I don't think it'll be good with Echoes of Creation either, because the cooldown restriction, you know, even if you invest a lot into tattoos and things like that, I still think people are going to be surprised how bad it feels if they try to do this. You have to remember that everything in this game is by comparison, and you're comparing these builds to bow builds and to spell builds. And when you're waiting an extra second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds for that rotation to cool down, you know, the other builds are already onto the next pack. And not to mention, I mean, one of the most fundamental problems with warcries and slam builds in general right now, which I've talked about in past videos, is that their single target damage isn't even that good. It isn't. There are no numbers on Path of Building someone can show me and they'll be like, wow, look at this. It does 20 million DPS on this Earth Shatter build, whatever. Well, that's under optimal conditions, and also your damage uptime is ass because you have to be right on top of the enemy, engaging with the mechanics. And the whole defensive thing is a whole nother argument where the defenses of the warcry and slam builds, you know, they don't justify the damage and they don't justify the clear. I mean, there's a huge disparity there. They're just very weak builds offensively and defensively. But, you know, regardless, we're not talking about that. We're just talking about the skill gem. At level 20, this gem has a reduced cooldown recovery rate. You know, let's say, for example, this tree, my cooldowns for most of these are around 4 seconds. Okay, and this is the most aggressive tree you can get. This is 1, 2, 3 warcry clusters in addition to a bunch of warcry medium clusters, a couple of warcry medium clusters. This is a lot of points, a huge point investment here. So with 4 seconds, you know, times 10%, 4.5 seconds. Assume the worst about it, and assume that you don't have a gem level 20. So you do your rotation here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it does it again. So I think that'll be playable for some builds and not for other builds. It won't work for Earth Shatter. Maybe you can get away with doing this for Sunder. And then you got to remember, of course, that, you know, in the case of Intimidating Cry, you only get the 3 exerts, assuming that you actually have Measured Fury allocated. Which, by the way, I mean, just to make sure this is clear, investing points into warcries on your tree always feels bad because other builds in other parts of the tree, over here, up here, they're investing their skill points into useful things like, you know, mana recovery situation. Like let's say they're pathing to EB. Well, that's really useful. Or they're getting more life and defensive nodes. That's very useful. The skill node, these nodes on the tree, 15% cooldown recovery rate, you know, these are just not that valuable. I would much rather have these points allocated into, I don't know, let's say this cluster right here. This 4-point cluster, maybe perhaps the most powerful single cluster in the whole game. But, you know, I have to put all these points into warcries in order to make this even playable. So the base skill gem on these things, Intimidating Cry, this is 8 seconds, right? But that's with 20% quality. You're not going to have 20% quality. It's hard to get GCPs. 8-second cooldown sucks. If you're hitting 3 times in 8 seconds, I just think people are going to be in for a very, very rude awakening if they try this build. We'll take a look at a Rage Vortex character I have. I think I have one. And the reason that Rage Vortex I think would be a little better... Oh gosh, it's not... This is my testing character. Whoops. The reason I like the idea of Rage Vortex for this is because Rage Vortex, it has a duration. In this case, the duration is extremely long because I was testing some Earthquake duration. So I have all this needless extra skill duration that I would not have, by the way. Would not have. Wait, I just had a funny idea. What if we did Earthquake of Amplification and Rage Vortex and just maximized our duration? That would be funny. I didn't even consider that as a possibility, but that is kind of funny. I mean, you can do that with Bone Shatter too. So yeah, duration is 8.78 seconds. Now that's a long time. Oh, wow. Yeah, I basically respec this character to do earthquake testing BS. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is funny. That is funny. Also, this is like this is pretty fat AoE. Why was the AoE so big? Did I miss something there? Well, mysteries abound. This is a really weird tree. I don't know why we have these impale points, but we were testing with this one anyways, so it doesn't matter. I wanted to talk a little bit about content creators bringing up melee with the idea that it's going to be better or playable. I just don't think people realize how bad the damage is and how bad the damage uptime is. I have not done the volcanic fissure of snaking thing. I've heard that it's great. Maybe that is really fantastic. I mean, I can't say. And maybe there's some molten strike or dual strike stuff that's like really impressive, really strong. I really can't say. I don't know, but I do know that these are not strong builds. They're not, and no level of automation is going to make them uber capable. They just don't have the defensive tools that the right side of the tree has. I mean, and they don't have the damage uptime of the Ignite builds or the DD builds. They don't have the consistency of those builds either. You get lucky if you're standing on top of the boss, DPSing them down. And in really chaotic fights, I mean, you basically need to be immortal in order to get your damage off. And so, yeah, I think anyone who is trying to play melee build, who's claiming that it's going to be good, and League starting it and saying slams are so back, slams are going to be great because of this. I think that's going to be the bait of the League. If I see some build guides from some creator that hasn't really played much slams and they're like, oh, this new gem is going to save slams, this Earth Shatter build is going to be amazing, they are 100% going to get washed by the League content. I mean, just washed. Like, yeah. Also, just wanted to throw in some closing thoughts. I do think overall, big picture, slams and melee builds in general are still undertuned. And I don't understand why there is such resistance to numerical changes. I think that myself as a player, I was salty last league and the league before that and the league before that they didn't make any number changes to skills that are objectively bad. There are gems in the game where I do think that just buffing the damage would go a long way. And you don't have to do some crazy huge buff, but maybe even a small thing like reducing the mana cost of certain attack skills, or I don't know, reducing or increasing the attack time. I mean, the attack speed penalty, making those a little more palatable. There are little subtle things you can do to make these skills more well balanced. I was a little bit disappointed in the patch notes that the balance pass was not aggressive enough. I really thought they could have cut down some of the top end a little more, and they could have buffed up the bottom end a little more as well. I think they were just too tentative and too passive with a lot of the game balance. And I know that this isn't a competitive game, but I would still like to have more parity, and I would like to see other melee archetypes on the HCSSF leaderboards besides Bone Shatter. So, final note on the mana thing. I do think that one of the reasons that this Call to Arms gem and the Slams tech is going to surprise people with how frustrated they're going to get and how surprised they are that it's going to be terrible, and they'd really be like, man, this build sucks. Mana is already a huge annoyance for warcry builds, and I know that it's easy for like Bone Shatter people to get some recoup or something, or just to find a way to slot in some leech somewhere. But bow builds have, mana forged arrows, and the spell builds obviously have Eldritch Battery. The slam people do not have anything but the life tap support gem. And considering how tragically socket starved these builds already are, It just feels especially bad to have these mana multipliers that are going to make this way, way worse than it could be. So I guess that's my closing thought. Melee is still garbage tier. I'm still going to play it because it's all I play pretty much, or at least it's all I league start. And I wish that they were made more competitive. I still think there's a lot of work left to be done. I've already mentioned in last videos that the Bone Shatter skill gem numerically is like almost twice as good as a skill gem like Sweep. And I just think that it's a little bit dumb that they haven't made any number changes. I really think the game could use a numbers balance pass. And I think it's really stupid that it still hasn't happened in a year and a half now. And so, I mean, at this point, I expected to be let down, and I was, but it doesn't feel as bad because I just, at this point, I didn't expect them to buff Melee. So, yeah, I hope someone at GG remembers that a skill like Sweep exists, and maybe they think to themselves, man, this build would take 2 months to gear up to do Ubers, whereas, you know, some spell builds can do it in a couple days, you know, mainly DD. And so it's like you gotta at least try to narrow the gap as much as you can and make them a little more balanced. And I think numbers would go a long way. So that's it. That's the end of my rant. Hope you all are having a nice Saturday night. Bye.